All right, today is August 2, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes Storage Special Interest Group. As a reminder, this meeting is public, recorded, and posted on YouTube. If you have any topics that you would like to discuss in the meeting today, feel free to add them to the agenda document. The link for this can be found in the calendar invite. We're going to start off by reviewing the items that we're working on for the Q3 1.12 release. As a reminder, the feature freeze date was yesterday for features that need to get into 1.12. That's the mechanism by which you declare that new features will be going into 1.12. And then code freeze for these deadlines, code freeze for these features is going to be September 4th. So we have just about a month. All right, so taking a look at the SIG storage planning spreadsheet, let's just get status updates here. First item is the snapshot and restore controller that Jing and Xing are working on. Do either of you have an update on this?
Is it Jing there? Okay. So we had a design meeting on Monday and got some good feedback. And also team reviewed it, and he also gave some comments on our design spec. We are in the process of updating the spec. Also, we're working on the API and controller code to address the review comments.
Cool. Sounds good. So it looks like code in progress, and the proposal is in its final stages of getting reviewed. That looks good. Next up is block volume support to beta. I actually dropped the priority of this to P2. I don't think this is a blocking feature for getting CSI to GA. It can move independent of the core CSI APIs. Vlad, do you want to talk about this at all?
Yeah, and also we also discuss basically in trying to target beta at a later time. That's what we talked about.
Yep.
So right now, so that's where we are. So I've already contacted the feature folks and let them know, so you can, I guess, change it to not being beta. Perfect. And we'll be spending the rest of the quarter doing stability changes.
Cool. So we'll leave it in alpha this quarter and stabilize the feature, bug fixes, etc. If this feature is important to you, please test it out with your driver and help us find issues and file bugs, and we can take a look at those and try to get them fixed. VMware vSphere driver. So I'm going to skip over the drivers mostly because they're not part of the core, and we'll just get a status update on the drivers at the end of the quarter. For CSI entry, we're discussing a cluster plugin registration mechanism. So we decided we're going to pursue this as a CRD. Basically, when a new CSI driver comes up, it can optionally register itself by creating a object with this new CRD saying, I am, a CSI driver, here's my name, and potentially some options that can change how a CSI, how Kubernetes interacts with that CSI driver. So for instance, if you have a driver that does not implement attach, when it registers itself with this CRD object, it has a field that says, I don't implement attach, so that when the Kubernetes attach detach controller comes along and decides whether it needs to do attach or detach, today it calls it for all CSI drivers. In the future, it would look for this object. If it existed and the object indicated that the driver didn't require attach, we can skip that operation and speed up execution for drivers that don't require attach detach. So this design is pending. I am going to help drive that, and Jan is going to help me review it. One of the
I'm confused about what you mean. Does that mean something else does the attach detach, or attach detach literally not required?
Attach detach happens through the same mechanism that it happens today, but there are a set of CSI drivers that don't have an attach detach operation. The challenge today is that for those drivers that don't have an attach detach, possibly don't even have a controller, they still have to ship with a CSI external attacher that does a no-op. And for all CSI drivers today, the Kubernetes system creates a volume attachment object, and it expects this external attacher to basically no-op it if attach doesn't exist. And that adds a little bit of performance delay on volume plugins that don't implement an attach, because you essentially have this extra code running, and the mounting steps have to wait for it to complete.
Well, could you just give an example of something that doesn't need an attach?
Sure. So the types of volume plugins that we're targeting this for are local ephemeral volumes. The example that's been tossed around is someone trying to write a plugin that will inject Kerberos tokens into a volume. So basically all they need is a mount and an unmount, node publish and a node unpublish. They have no use for provisioning. They have no use for attaching. They don't actually implement a controller. So think of it like the secret volumes or config map volumes that we have in tree, but implemented using CSI.
Okay, I totally get it. Thank you.
Cool. So that work is pending. And again, this would be optional. If your volume plugin didn't implement it, things would continue to work as they do today. Kubernetes just uses its current standard behavior with how it interacts with your CSI driver.
Oh, Saad, one more really popular example of a plugin that doesn't need attach is NFS.
Right. Yep, that's a good one.
NFS, GlusterFS, Azure file, all these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of volume plugins that could benefit from this. Moving on, skipping external attach detach for non-attachable volumes. So this was one of the goals for this quarter, and it turns out number 5 actually solves it in a very nice, clean way. So we're pursuing that. Once number 5 is available, Jan can implement number 6. For number 7, replace volume reconstruction with checkpointing. I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at this, Vlad. It's pretty low priority.
Yeah, I've not, but
okay. Yeah,
I'll make time for it before the quarter is over.
Yeah, no worries. If you get to it, that's cool. If not, no big deal. Next up is pulling out the mount library that currently exists in Kubernetes to allow it to be shared with CSI drivers. Travis has been working on this. Travis, any updates?
Yeah, I am working on this, and I hope to have for Michelle to look at in about a week.
Cool. Actually, let me update this one. Okay. Next up is the Cubelet device plugin integration. This is also high priority for CSI. It is the mechanism by which a driver on a node registers itself with a kubelet. It makes a kubelet aware that it exists. Today, the default behavior is that when a volume driver is used, when mount is called, we construct the Unix domain socket path and expect the Unix domain socket to exist there. If it doesn't, it will fail. Once this feature is enabled, Any Unix domain socket created in a specific directory results in a registration mechanism getting kicked off. That registration mechanism identifies the type of the volume plugin, for example, CSI or GPU device plugin, and then allows for the Cubelet CSI code to do further registration. We want to use this mechanism, one, to align with the rest of Kubernetes, and two, because there's a security requirement from folks like Jordan Liggett, who have been saying that the external sidecar container that we have today, the driver registrar, which currently updates the node API object, should not be updating the node API object directly. The node API object should only be updated by the kubelet. So ideally, we want some way for a plugin to be able to tell Cubelet when it is installed, so that Cubelet can do the registration and update the node API object on its behalf. So that's the reason we want to align with this work. We've been talking to folks who built the alpha version of this feature last quarter about driving it to beta this quarter. There's some question about whether they're going to be able to do so or not based on the outstanding items that they have remaining. Sergey, Vlad, I think you guys might have more context on this.
Yeah, we're trying to set up a meeting this week to continue the conversation regarding this. And it looks like you started the conversation with the author as well, so we're going to continue that conversation and take it from there to see if it's possible to do a beta this quarter.
Yeah, and if it turns out that we're not able to align our timelines with this feature, we can consider alternatives that would allow us to fulfill our security requirements without having to be dependent on this feature.
Right.
Moving on, prepare CSI for GA in Q4. This is basically making sure that the rest of these features land. Pluggable end-to-end test framework. Patrick, do you have any updates on this? It doesn't look like Patrick's on the line. I know this is something that he's still very interested in pursuing, and something that'll be very important for us going forward as the number of plugins continues to grow. Next up is local PV health monitoring. Previously, there was a design in progress. Michelle, any updates on this?
Yeah, I need to review this.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure if I'm going to have time to review it this quarter, but
that's okay. I think the priority on this is relatively low, so if we get to it, great. If not, no big deal. Next up is Kubernetes Conformance, establishing processes, tests, documentation. Michelle had a proposal out. Michelle, any updates on this?
Yeah, so we discussed the higher level ideas of the proposal last week, so it sounds like we have consensus in the SIG on the plan. So now we can move forward and start looking at what we need to do to actually execute on this. So I think Brad has some people on his team that can help out with this, and we'll have to sync up with Patrick too to coordinate efforts.
Okay. Sounds good. Speaking of Brad, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay. As a complete aside, are you going to be able to attend the community SIG today?
No, I told Solly to kick it off, to move it.
Okay, so we'll do it next week?
Yeah, or the following week.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Next up is CSI Conformance. This is lower priority for this quarter, but also something that we're tracking. Any updates on this, Michelle?
No, I've mostly been focusing on the Kubernetes Conformance side.
Okay, cool. Next up is provisioning capacity reporting for generic topology design. Updates on this?
I started looking at this again. I'm going to brainstorm some more ideas and see if that sticks.
Cool. And as we move through the quarter, we can rebalance work and decide things that are lower priority. If we need to drop them, we can drop them. So those are also options. Block volume support to beta. This is Matt Wong. Is Matt Wong on the call? Or anyone that can give an update on his behalf?
We have a PR out for this, so it just needs review by me and some others.
Okay. CSI external provisioner was having scalability issues. Matt Wong had a number of PRs out. Does anybody know what the status of those are?
Don't believe they're merged. I'm pretty sure they're still in progress.
Okay. I know, I think the last status that I got on this was that he believed there was going to be a larger refactor required for this. It would be interesting to get his input if he could attend any of the CSI meetings or this meeting.
Okay, I'll ask him.
Cool, thank you. Next up is topology dynamic provisioning to beta.
So this is depending on all the cloud providers to implement the new API changes that we did in the provisioner. So Deep has been working on that part. I think we just got the AWS changes in. So now I think is what remains is the GCE plugin and also some E2E tests.
Awesome. Solid progress. Next up is local volume dynamic provisioning, which was a stretch goal for this quarter.
Yeah, it depends on the capacity reporting design to get through. I think like Chu Quain has also been prototyping some stuff on his side.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, next up is evaluating generic options for environment variables currently implemented as alpha for subpath. This is...
Yeah, so I can update on this.
Sure.
It turns out that the change we made for the alpha feature is an API breaking change, so we cannot use that approach. So we need to reconsider a new design now. And I think at this point, the feature is kind of stalled. We're kind of looking for people to take ownership of it.
Okay, so Kev Taylor wasn't able to take ownership.
Yeah.
Okay. Question, do we need to roll back the alpha change?
Probably. That would probably be a good idea.
Okay. And second question is, what was the concern, like the breaking change? I thought it was just adding a way to be able to inject the pod ID into the path, right?
Yeah, the main thing is now the semantics of the field has changed. So if you had a $sign in your subpath name before, now we would try to evaluate the environment variable. So it's
having a $sign in your subpath is legal?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so rolling back environment variable expansion seems like it's a pretty high pry thing. Bug level work. Don't need a feature repo bug for it. Anybody interested in rolling back a feature? Should be fairly straightforward. It went in last quarter. There shouldn't be too much pain in pulling it out. You may even be able to do it in an automated way, possibly. Great way to get a commit into the core of Kubernetes.
I'll take it.
What's our timeline on that?
By the end of the quarter.
Which is?
So September 4th is the code freeze.
Yeah, you can sign me up for that.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And whoever that second person was, do you want to sign up for a reviewer?
Yeah, sure. That was me.
Cool. Who was that?
Conor Landry.
Connor. Sorry if I butchered the spelling of your name. Please.
It's okay. It's a C-O-N-O-R.
C-O-N-O-R.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Cool. So CSI driver, we're going to skip over that. Iscuzzy common library. John, do you want to give an update on this?
Yeah, so I've got that started. I kind of ended up tying it to the driver that we're skipping because it kind of makes sense.
Yep.
So not as quickly as I'd like, but hopefully in another week, I should have something ready for Ben to start looking at, or anybody else that's interested in looking at it.
John, is there a URL? Like a repo where you're putting the common stuff?
Yeah, I'll have it. I'll make my GitHub repo with it public, and then you can check it out.
Cool.
So if anybody is writing a CSI driver that has Iscuzzy mounting, you should really take a look at the work that John is doing here. He's coming up with a standard library that can be used by any arbitrary CSI driver that does Iscuzzy mounting. Ideally, we want this to be usable by multiple different drivers. So please take a look at that, provide feedback, and see how we can make it usable by multiple different implementations. I know a lot of you have Iscuzzy-based CSI drivers, so this will save you a lot of time and effort, and we can maintain the common core library as a community.
I'll get that public and put a link to the repo next week on this sheet so everybody can find it.
Sounds good. And let me know if you need help finding a place to put it. Either me or Brad can help you with that.
Excellent. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Next up is inline support, volume support for CSI drivers. This goes hand in hand with the use case that we were discussing earlier with local ephemeral volumes. Currently, CSI only supports access via PV/PVC, which is fine for remote attachable volumes. But for local ephemeral volumes, think like a secret volume, it doesn't make sense to access that through a PV/PVC. You should be able to reference those directly inline in your pod. The challenge is that we don't want to be able to allow those types of volumes to be, or attachable remote volumes to be referenced directly inline in a pod for multiple reasons. One, because it breaks portability. Two, because it makes things like doing topology aware scheduling impossible. So for a number of reasons, we don't want attachable volumes to be referenced inline. We've been looking for a design that would allow us to enable inline CSI drivers, but not for all drivers, only for some subset of drivers. Now that we are planning this CSI registry, we can actually use that for this logic, where if the driver wants to be able to do inline, it would have to register itself with the registry and say that it doesn't do attaching. And if that is the case, then if someone references a driver inline, we can check that and allow it to happen. This is work that Jan is driving. Jan, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Not really.
Cool. Next up is passing workload information to the node publish call. So this, again, is a use case that arises out of that ephemeral local volume use case where folks are trying to write volumes that'll inject, for example, some sort of identity into, or some token into the pod. What they're interested in at mount time, though, is what is the pod that they're going to be mounting into. CSI currently doesn't provide information on the pod namespace, pod name, pod UID, because CSI itself tries to be agnostic to the container orchestration system that it is running inside. We discussed with the CSI community if there was some way that we could pass workload information along, but in general, it appears that doing so, we're kind of blurring the boundaries and making the driver aware of the CO that it's running inside. Jan came up with an interesting proposal where we might be able to do this using strictly sidecar containers. Jan, do you want to give a quick description of that?
Yeah, we already have a sidecar containers running on every node with CSI driver registrar that registers CSI driver into Cubelet, and currently it passes just the socket, a path to Unix domain socket to the driver, and it would pass also some sort of configuration how to deal with the CSI driver, including a flag that we should, for this particular driver, we should pass also the pod name, pod namespace, and service account to the driver. So in the end, it's the admin who needs to configure the registrar to pass this flag, and from that, everything will be working.
That seems like a fairly clean solution and doesn't require us to modify the CSI spec. So I think we're going to be able to get away with not having this second item. All right, next up is dynamic volume per node count to beta. This was a feature that was introduced as alpha that last quarter. It allows for a dynamically changing what the limit of volumes for a given plugin per node is. Hemant, any updates on this?
Yeah, so I've been working on updating the code for CSI, and I'm working on updating the proposal as well. Like, there's a plan to the CSI bits. I think it depends on one key thing is like the driver name and the provisioner name to be same. And I'm trying to talk to SIG about how these limits will be overridable for entry volume plugins, and if that is something they will allow. So yeah, and those are the two problems that I'm trying to solve mainly for 1.14.
Okay. Sounds good. So that was the CSI entry dynamics support. Any updates on moving the entry feature to beta?
Yeah, we can do that. That existing one we can move it. Is like it should just work, I think.
Okay. And there haven't been any major concerns raised about it, right?
No.
Okay. So I think we should be okay there. CSI spec, adding volume usage metrics. So I know you've been discussing this at length with the CSI community.
Yeah, this was merged
okay, great.
yesterday. So like the plugin authors can now emit stat metrics from stat users from their plugins. I know some people at IBM are working similar thing for Flex, but I don't know if they want to keep it external or what's the plan. But
got it. All right, that's great news. One of the first features to be completed this quarter. Next up, dynamic max capacity per plugin per node. So this is a new requirement, similar to the dynamic max volume count, but the difference here is that it's based on the aggregate capacity of the attached volumes. Any updates on this one?
No, the design that I have been working on includes both the limit and the capacity. So,
okay.
So the plan, this will be still covered as a separate feature gate, but like it's just a side effect. Yeah, roll into the same thing.
Sounds good. And finally, for you, we have CSI spec adding support for volume expansion. This was again discussed on the CSI call this week. Any status updates?
I think like there was a comment by you that I addressed, and I think we are closer than ever to hopefully to get the spec merged. And yeah, we just need people to review the PR. And
cool. Yeah, great work on that, and thank you for all your patience. I know it can sometimes be painful to get changes through the spec.
Don't worry, it's a big one. So
yeah. We're going to skip over the CSI driver, and for the entry drivers, let's discuss the topology changes. Deep, do you want to give an update on these, Azure, AWS, and GC?
Yeah, so the number 35, the EBS is in. We need to add the end-to-end tests, as Michelle pointed out.
Cool.
For Azure, the zone awareness just kicked, they just landed. I think the PR is probably all approved, but they can start using the common modules that we introduced with AWS. And GCE is the next one that's going to be started next week.
Okay, so sorry, Azure PR in progress, and GCP is next. GCE is next.
I would say the Azure, the overall zone awareness for the Azure cloud, like that PR is in flight at the moment.
Okay.
And once that's in, then I can add a PR to basically do the right things for zone awareness.
Okay. So on PR, which is in flight. And the other question that we had was whether Azure File needed any zone awareness.
It doesn't appear to be the case, so we can probably cross that.
Perfect. So we'll stop tracking that. And then mark this as started, and then we'll hopefully get an update on GCP next time. And then for the GCE PD, update REPD to support the new topology framework.
Right.
I guess that's going to happen hand in hand.
Yeah, those two are the next ones.
Cool. We're going to skip over the CSI drivers. And any updates on the CIFS common library?
I don't have anything right now. I was kind of waiting on the NFS one to get started.
Okay, that makes sense. It may be that we punt this to next quarter and take the learnings from the ones that we developed this quarter. Okay, so next up is finalizing the migration story for EntryCSI. David, do you want to give an update on this? Looks like David's not on the call, but I had a design review with him this week to review the proposal. The current state of the proposal looks good to me. I think the only outstanding item left is how entry inline volumes are going to map to CSI, since CSI currently doesn't have entry volume. CSI doesn't have inline volumes, excuse me, how entry inline volumes are going to map. So that's going to be dependent on the CSI inline design. If we end up having some mechanism to do inline volumes, we might be able to use that. Otherwise, David needs to come up with another mechanism to do this mapping. So let me update that. We're going to skip over the CSI drivers, containerized kubelet issues. So there was a number of issues with containerized kubelet. We were looking for an owner. Brad, did you have any luck finding anyone?
Yeah, I did, but I need to revisit this.
Okay.
Let me take a note. I'll have status next time.
Perfect. Thanks. We're going to skip over the CSI driver. Then we have the external provisioner for the topology changes for the external provisioner. Cheng, do you want to talk about this? Looks like Chang is not on the call, but this was something else that we had a design discussion for this week. We made a lot of good progress in identifying the exact work that needed to be done, both in the external provisioner as well as the Cubelet, and Chang is starting work on that. Skipping over the CSI driver, we have the Fibre channel common library. Brad, any status updates on this?
No, but I have identified a resource that'll take it. I don't think that this will be done for 111 though.
Okay, or for 112. Yeah, no, that's okay. If we have to punt it, that's okay. I think if you can get one of these common libraries in this quarter, that'll be a great starting point. The Iscuzzy one looks very promising, and I think it can serve as a, we can learn from it and just, see what the rest of these should look like from that.
Yeah, I was actually hoping to combine those into a single package, by the way.
That would be super cool. Okay, so how to test Fibre channel Iscuzzy NFS library. So this is an important question. As a community, we're going to end up maintaining this common library. One of the challenges that we had with the entry drivers was that we had no good way to test it. We had an item this quarter to investigate doing that. Any updates on this, Brad?
No.
Okay. So we'll follow up with this next time. Next up is deleting Iscuzzy devices on Unmount. This was a PR that was pending review.
Yeah, this merged last week.
Awesome. And are there any follow-up PRs, or are we done with this item?
We can be done with this item. There is another related bug that I'm working on. So I'm going to have another. Actually, I have the code written. I just haven't tested it.
Okay.
I'm waiting to push it up until I test it. But there remains a race condition in the multipath code where you can sometimes not get multipath when you're supposed to.
Got
it's
it.
going to be pretty easy to fix.
That's great. I'm glad we've got someone who understands this code path and is making it more robust. Cool. So when you have that, feel free to add an item here, or just if you can take it offline, that's okay too. Moving
It'll
on.
be next week. It'll be next week for sure.
Oh, perfect. CSI library for NFS Common. Is this in the works?
Yeah. Well, so as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, I'm fairly certain that nothing is needed for NFS because it's just a mount.
Yep.
I can say at this point, having been working on the NFS CSI driver of my own, I'm 95% certain we won't need any common library at all because it's just going to be a mount call at the end of the day.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay. Cool.
But if I do realize that there's some code that could be shared that would benefit everybody doing NFS drivers, I'll bring it up.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Ben. Next item also for you, Ben, is host path volume reconstruction support. This was pretty low priority.
Well, so what we had said was if we get the checkpointing stuff implemented, then the reconstruction code will go away, and that would be a better outcome here because actually solving this issue would be a considerable amount of new code to scan all of the subpath volumes. Or right now, subpath sort of piggybacks on other reconcilers to get reconciled, and there's nothing that just goes and looks for subpaths that aren't attached to anything. So there'd be a substantial amount of new code to reconcile orphaned subpaths.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. If we can do that, that would be ideal. I know that the volume reconstruction code is the source of a lot of bugs in our system, so if we can eliminate that, that would be wonderful. Next
that's what I'm counting on.
Next up is flex volume resizing. HoneyKit, are you on the line? Does anybody know the status of this?
Yeah, I think they're working on it. And Aniket, sorry, Aniket, is that you?
No, actually, Aniket should be online, but this is Srini, and the code, we have finished the code. Aniket has finished the code. We are trying to write the UTE and the integration test to support that, so yeah, should be.
Hi, Srini, thanks. Aniket here. I had a snafu with my headset, so I just rejoined. Yes, Hemant and Srini were right. We do have the code completed, and we should have a PR shortly. Hemant, as we discussed offline, I can set up a quick call with you to go over the couple of comments that you had to understand them better. I understand that you had a few comments around the admission controller and a few other things. So, Srini has also been helping me on the end-to-end test. That's what we are now concentrating on.
Cool.
Awesome. Great progress. Thank you very much. Next up is online volume expansion, which was introduced as alpha last quarter, moving that to beta. Hemant, any updates on this? Is this something that we still want to pursue this quarter?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because this is pretty important for give better user experience, and I think this is on track. It should not. Matthew is helping me out as well. Matthew, and I think Matthew will be doing.
Put Matt's name down there. And then block volume support. I think we duplicated this item. It was somewhere above.
It's towards the top.
Okay. I'll just go ahead and delete this one then.
Hey, what happened last week where we were missing like 30 items? Did we just
I went through, I think it was just a couple of items that were out of order that confused us. So I think we're good. If you guys recognize anything that was missing, I don't think there's anything missing anymore. If you do notice anything missing, feel free to go ahead and add it to the bottom. So 2 items remaining, node shutdown. This was a PR asking to be smarter about what happens when a node is marked for shutdown. Yasin, are you on the line? Looks like this PR was in review last time. Does anyone have any update on it? Okay, we can follow up with that offline. The last feature that I added this quarter was mount namespace propagation. This feature has been sitting in beta for a little bit of time. I wanted to check with Jan to see if we wanted to promote it to stable this quarter. Jan, any thoughts on that?
I haven't heard any complaints, so I guess it's pretty stable.
I vote for stable. Won't this be a crucial piece of CSI?
Yes, exactly. So that's why I'd like to move it this quarter if we can. Does anybody want to sign up for this work? Jan, can you characterize how much work this might be or how difficult it might be?
I think that means that the documentation has to be updated, identify any missing tests, but I don't think there are any, and that's it.
You need to change.
Yeah, sure, I need to change the feature, but that's one-liner or two-liner.
So this should be a fairly trivial change. It basically requires ensuring that documentation has been updated, updating the feature flag to promote this from beta to stable, and then ensuring there are end-to-end tests. It seems like a great opportunity for anybody who's been sitting on the sidelines and wants to get involved with a core Kubernetes feature. Anyone interested in this? And it is critical for GA of CSI, so very important feature. We've got 32 participants on the call. Anyone?
Saad, do we missed the feature deadline with this one? Can we get an exception?
I think I might have caught it. Yeah, I think I have it as marked as stable for V12, and I did that before 6 days ago. So I think we're good there.
You can put my name on it if nobody else wants it.
Awesome. Falling on the sword. Thank you, Brad. All right. That is all that we have for status updates. So a lot going on this quarter. Let's move on to PRs that need attention. We have one from Ardalan. Ardalan, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So this is a pretty straightforward PR. The way the admission controller is written right now, it allows PVC resize only for volume plugins that support resize or expansion. As a result, plugins like NFS, Iscuzzy, and I think this is the issue with the Flex driver, you cannot do resize with them. So there are two main motivations for this change. One is that admission controller doesn't necessarily know which CSI plugins would support resize. So what this does is basically delegates the volume plugin check to the expand controller as opposed to the admission controller. It also allows the external provisioners or external controllers to do resize for plugins like NFS or Iscuzzy, where it's not possible to have resize capability for entry plugins. So this is the gist of it. But what I wanted to talk most about was that I followed the same model as external provisioning here. So when you're doing external provisioning with a PVC, you set an event called provisioning external or external provisioning on the PVC. And this follows the same model. So it sets a new event called external expanding on the PVC. But what I wanted to discuss was that as we're exploring new operations like snapshots, clones, it may make sense just to have a generic event that will capture everything done by external controllers. And whether we want to do it this way instead of what we've been doing so far. So I'm open to your suggestions.
Yeah, I've looked at also the PR though. The thing I think mostly it's what we want to do. I agree with the general idea of it. I think, and I think we discussed in previous call as well, and we agreed with the general idea of it. The main thing is like the event name. I don't know, externally expanding. I know we used a similar name in this thing, and then some of the implementation bits I have left some comments. I think we can get. I mean, from my perspective, if we can get those addressed, I think we'll be good to go.
Yeah, sure. But do we want to have a generic event for every action done by external provisioners or external controllers instead of creating a new event for every operation?
The dumb question, how do you even recognize that an external operation is happening? So for example, like snapshots, how would you even detect that it happened?
So in the case of snapshots, it would be the creation of the CRD, the volume snapshot CRD.
I see.
In the case of provisioning, it's the creation of the PVC. Here, it's the change in the PVC size. So basically the same logic that Kubernetes controllers use to detect the action, the same logic gets done by the external controllers or external provisioners.
And so the idea here is you're extending the list of possible volume events, and who would trigger the event? Would it be the external controller responsible for it? Or would it be?
No, it's the user. So the user changes the PVC size, and that change in the PVC size gets detected by
the admission controller.
Well, in this case, gets detected by the admission controller, but admission controller just doesn't reject it. It just allows it to go through, which gets detected by the expand controller.
Okay.
Or in the case of external controllers, it will get detected by the external controller, so they can act on it.
Okay. So in the case of, for example, snapshots, we're not going to have any entry controller. So if we had an event here for, I don't know, external snapshot, then the external snapshot controller would be responsible for triggering this event.
Right.
Okay. So the call out here is that we just need to ensure that the possible enumeration here captures all the events that we do care about.
Right. So basically, whether we want to have some kind of generic event that would capture everything done by external controllers, or whether we want to have more fine-grained events.
Got it.
Yeah. So that was the.
I think it makes sense to have like individual event for each stuff that happens, like for provisioning for different event, for resizing different event, rather than just one generic event.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Okay.
So for snapshot, it's not going to be defined here, right? It's going to be in the external snapshotter, right?
Yeah.
Right. Snapshots are fine because they're CRDs, and we can either use the in-stock snapshot controller, or vendors can deploy their own controllers for dealing with the snapshot objects.
Yeah, I think the only thing is that I'm not sure external expanding is a good name. Maybe something like pending volume expansion, pending volume expansion or something. But we can discuss that in the PR, I think, that the name.
Sure, yeah, let's discuss that in the PR.
All right, cool.
Yeah, just follow the external provisioning event.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, any other PRs that need attention or bugs that aren't getting paid attention to that anybody wants to raise? All right, and any design reviews or anything else that you'd like to bring up today?
There's another design review tomorrow for cloning. We've been having them on Fridays, given that this falls on Thursdays. I think we had a real productive design review last week, splitting out the cloning into limiting to a single namespace and then introducing the transfer of volumes and populator as secondary design considerations. So if people are able to attend, I would absolutely love the feedback. And everyone should already have an invite.
Cool.
Same time as this meeting, but tomorrow.
Erin, if you don't mind asking, maybe more people are joined in the call. Like, what was the conclusion about the host triggered cloning actually in the last call? Like, I didn't.
The host cloning, the host assisted cloning.
Yeah.
So the host is cloning initially is meant to leverage the technology by the storage itself to dedupe the storage on the back end and provide an instant copy, right? But there may be cases where we want to clone, and snapshots are a perfect example of this, maybe from one storage type to the next, where we want to have a best practices designed around having the host assist in creating that volume. So that's where host-assisted cloning comes in. It's you may have created the volume using one technology, and you want to create another volume using a different, but you want the copy of the exact same data. So this could be true of what is allowed for a storage class within a namespace, that you allow some types of storage in one and not in the other. You want to pre-populate the volume for testing, maybe a database. Something like that. So that's where it comes from. Does that make sense, Hamant?
Yeah, it does. I was just curious about how it will work on Cubelet. So, okay, we can discuss this in the other call.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah, the cloning stuff is looking really cool, especially combined with snapshots. So if it's an area that you're interested in, please try to attend the meeting and provide feedback. That's all that I have for today. Connor, you have a question about how to get added to SIG Storage. You should be able to just add yourself. If you go to the SIG Storage group, you should just be able to join. If you have any trouble with that, either email me or Brad and we can help.
Very cool, thank you.
Is there any other questions, concerns, comments, anything anybody wants to raise? All right, great. We'll call it for today, and we'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. See ya.
Bye.
Right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.